Hey guys, Eckhart Slaughter here with another episode of Star Wars Starship vs. the series. We take two of your favorite Star Wars spaceships, put them head to head to see which one would come out on top. Before we get too far into today's episode, I want to take a look at Saturday's poll results. In that episode, we saw the Death Star go against 100 Super Star Destroyers. I predicted that the 100 Super Star Destroyers would win, and that they would win almost every time. And you guys actually agreed with me. Over 2,400 of you guys voted, which made me super happy, and 93% of you, or 2,300 exactly, said that the 100 Super Star Destroyers would come out on top. 5% or 137 of you said that the Death Star would win, and then 35 of you said that it was too close to tell. Make sure that you guys vote in today's episode by clicking the little card that comes down, and I'll put down in the comments where you can do that as well. My goal for today is have at least 2,000 of you guys voting again, so please help me make that happen. Now, onto the episode. And once again today, we are looking at two ships that are very closely related. We're taking the Aggressive Reconnaissance 170 Starfighter and putting it against the X-Wing. As I'm sure most of you know, the Aggressive Reconnaissance 170, also known as the ARC 170, was one of the best starfighters used by the Republic during the Clone Wars. And from this ship would come the Rebel Alliance's most famous starfighter, the X-Wing. So we're going to be putting these ships head to head and looking at their firepower, their defensive capabilities, and then their intangibles to see which one would come out on top. Now, this is a one-on-one battle. We're looking at these ships how they ordinarily existed, so no modifications, no backup, no nothing. Also, because we're focusing on the starships themselves, we're going to presume that the pilots are both equally skilled. One other thing that I want to clarify is that the X-Wing isn't really a single type of ship, but more a line of ships. And this line was continually upgraded and changed by both the Rebellion and the New Republic. So we're going to go with the most famous and really the most basic X-Wing, the T-65. Let's first look at weaponry, and here we'll see an interesting thread that actually runs throughout the entire matchup. Although the AR-70 would lead to the development of the X-Wing, the two ships were fairly different and were best suited for different combat roles. The ARC was a much heavier ship. It had heavier weapons, it was bulkier, it actually had 3 people in it rather than just the one on the X-Wing, and it could be used pretty effectively in both a dogfighting role and also against capital ships. On the other hand, the X-Wing was more of an air superiority starfighter, and it most effectively worked against other smaller starfighters rather than capital ships. Alright, so onto the actual weapons matchup. Now, both of these ships both use S-foils. However, the ARC 170, unlike the X-Wing, only has one large cannon under each set of its wings, unlike the X-Wing, which has smaller cannons on each individual wing. Now, these two cannons are certainly much heavier than the standard weapons you'd see on a starship, certainly during the Clone Wars and even comparably with an X-Wing. And along with that, it also had 2 rear-facing cannons. Also interesting is that each of these cannons were operated independently by a gunner. One would work the 2 front cannons and another would work the 2 on the back. The X-Wing, on the other hand, as most of us know, had individual guns on each one of its wings. These guns had different weapon settings, so you could fire each one individually, all 4 at once, cycle between them, which was kind of neat and had a bit of versatility. Both ships also carried proton torpedoes on board, although these were unguided and I doubt they'd be very effective in a dogfight. All in all, because the weapons are heavier and I think that laser cannons facing backwards is incredibly useful, I'll give this to the ARC 170. Alright, so on to defensive capabilities, and as always, it's kind of hard to come down in a clear way in this category because the idea of armor and hull strength and shielding is all kind of nebulous and hard to really pin down. So quickly, let's first talk about the X-Wing. We know that the X-Wing isn't really a superior fighter in any one area, but it's just pretty good across the entire board. We know that it's pretty maneuverable, it's got good weapons, and that its shielding is pretty standard. On the other hand, the ARC 170 kind of represents a conscious choice towards heavy weaponry and heavy shields at the expense of speed and maneuverability. So I think just logically, you have to give this category to the ARC 170. I mean, there's nothing that says that the X-Wings have some sort of secret technology that makes their shields surprisingly strong. While on the other hand, we know that the ARC 170 was specifically built to be a slow, strong, powerful starfighter. So I'll give it to the Republic ship. I do think that it's also worth mentioning that both ships had astromech droids on board. This meant that small repairs or adjustments could be made on the fly. But alright, let's now look at intangibles. And right now I think the main intangible that we have to consider here is the speed of the X-Wing when compared to the ARC 170. The X-Wing itself wasn't really a speedster, it wasn't super maneuverable when compared to other fighters, it was probably middle of the road. It's not like an A-Wing or a TIE Interceptor. But, as I mentioned previously, the ARC 170 is very slow. Well, actually, if we want to be specific and look at old Star Wars expanded universe material, the X-Wing and the ARC-170 would have had similar top speeds, but the X-Wing would have been able to accelerate about 1.5 times faster. Now, presumably when you look at maneuvering, the stats would have been comparable. And there's not really a whole lot else I want to mention on this or on Intangibles generally. I think we should just get to the battle. So again, we've got a very well-armed but pretty slow starfighter going against a middle-of-the-road, kind of good in all categories starfighter. And to me, this is kind of like an X-Wing versus an A-Wing type of deal. And I will say that I did go back and forth on who should win on this before coming down finally and deciding. And I think that just represents how difficult it is to kind of decide against two different design strategies, speed versus firepower. Alright, so the actual battle, how will that go down? I think the X-Wing is going to want to stay out of the main firing line of the ARC-170, and it should be able to do that reasonably effectively because it is pretty maneuverable. That being said, the ARC-170 isn't a Y-Wing. It's not completely immobile, it's not incapable of making turns or spinning around. The X-Wing is really only 1.5 times, actually a little bit less than 1.5 times more maneuverable. And the ARC-170 has the advantage of being able to shred the X-Wing with probably one shot. I mean, we saw during the Battle of Yavin that TIE fighters are able to destroy X-Wings in one shot, so certainly the ARC-170 with a very heavy cannon should be able to at least very badly damage the ship. And you also have to think, in the Star Wars universe, how are most dogfights won and lost? And in my mind, a lot of that comes down to ship placement. I mean, go back to the Battle of the First Death Star. Ships that get behind other ships are able to successfully take them down. And this is one of the other areas where I give the ARC-170 a big of an advantage. It's got those two rear turrets. And I think that those will be able to help kind of nullify, well, not totally nullify, but help decrease the effectiveness of the X-Wing's speed, because it won't be able to really take advantage of the main weak spot of most starships, which is right behind it. So really the X-Wing's only chance is to get the ARC-170 from the side, because the ship's cannons, I think, are just too powerful. But given that the ARC-170 is still reasonably mobile, again, not like a Y-Wing or a dedicated bomber, I think the X-Wing will have a hard time doing so. So yes, I think the ARC-170 will be able to neutralize the speed advantage of the X-Wing, especially when we take that second gunner into consideration, who can help control the main guns and hit the X-Wing if it's in a hard-to-reach spot. And if we look at things from the X-Wing's perspective, I think that it's going to have a hard time. One volley of shots probably isn't going to be enough to take down the Republic Starfighter. It's going to need to hit it a few times, all while avoiding the lasers of the Republic ship itself. So, all in all, I give the Republic ARC-170, its one pilot, 2 gunners, and its astromech droid the win here. And I say that it wins probably 7 times out of 10. I mean, perhaps the X-Wing can really outmaneuver the ARC-170 and get all 4 of its lasers to hit the Republic ship. That would be probably its only chance. But I think more times than not, it's gonna lose. But I would love to hear what you guys think. Right now, you can vote on who you think would win this head-to-head matchup, and I think that this is probably gonna be the closest vote yet. Of course, let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Did I get something wrong? Did I get something right? Did I forget to mention something about either ship? Let me know. And of course, don't forget to tell me what matchup you'd like to see next, and if you see a matchup in the comments that you like, make sure to give it a thumbs up and a supporting comment, because that is how I choose the topics for my next video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. As always, may the Force be with you.